All right, let's say you have a piece of wood that you need to cut down to 16 1/4 inches long and 3 3/4 inches wide. The best tool for this job is a table saw. So this is a table saw. It has an on-off switch. The on-off switch makes the blade turn. Some accessories you should have are a miter gauge. This is used for pushing wood and holding wood at a specific angle. This one is set to 90 degrees, although you can shift it back and forth if you're trying to make a non-90 degree cut. The other accessory is a rip fence, and you can use the rip fence for a cross cut like this to guide along that way, but it's typically used for a rip cut like this where you're cutting a board to a specific width. Cross cut goes across the grain, rip cut goes with the grain. Now theoretically you'd have a different blade for rip cuts versus cross cuts, or if you're a real professional you'd have two different table saws with two different blades, use one for each type of cut, or you use a hybrid blade that does okay for both types. This up and down knob will make the blade go up and down. You can raise it up to make sure you're at a 90 degree level. There's another knob on the other side we don't turn that can tilt the blade in an angle. We're going to be doing straight 90 degree cuts, so we're not messing with that one. The blade should only be about 1/8 inch or 3 millimeters above the top of the wood that you're cutting. So with the tape measure, we can measure out 16 1/4, and I'm putting the line just to this side of the 1/4 mark. So we want to cut off that line and leave everything on this side. So if you want to cut off this side of the board with the X, we're placing that line right at the edge of this tooth, and the tooth that alternate on either side on this particular blade. So you want to find the tooth that's farthest over this way and use that tooth. I'm holding it against the miter gauge here. You get it right where it needs to be, and you just cut right like that. Notice this hand is within 2 inches or so of that blade, so you want to be careful. Don't be doing this. Always keep it like that. And you can use your other hand on the other side of the wood to just cut straight through there. Now, if you were trying to do this with some other type of saw, or you didn't have a miter gauge, you might want to draw a line all the way across. So you could measure to the other side over here, mark 16 1/4 there, and then if all you have is a straight edge, you can put a straight edge between those two marks and draw along it. Now, if you have a factory edge here and you have a carpenter square, you might as well use the carpenter square. Basically line the carpenter square up. You can verify, hey, is it hitting both of those marks at the same spot? And here, I'm off by 1/16 of an inch on one of these. I don't know which one it is. I'm going to check again. So that one looks pretty good. This one is over this way just slightly. It's also possible the end of your board is off, but we're going to assume this factory edge is correct. And so I'm going to draw this line here. And that would be useful if you were using like a jigsaw to try to cut that line. With the table saw, really you only need the one mark right there. Now typically you do not want to stand directly behind the blade like this, but for a small cross-cut piece of wood like this where you're holding on to both sides with your hands, as you go through, as soon as it separates, you pull your hands apart, and there's no way that blade's going to catch a piece of wood and throw it back at you. For the rip cut, we want to keep 3 3/4 on this side. There's two ways you can do that. You can set your rip fence to 3 3/4, so there's a nice little gauge down here. You can just set it where it should be, 3 3/4, lock it in place, and then of course you have to measure and make sure that it's actually 3 3/4 to the blade, like that. And so if you're happy with that measurement, then you can just turn the saw arm and run this wood through like that. Now if you're running it through like this, you're definitely going to want a pushing stick where you can push the wood past the blade. And here, you really don't want to be getting your fingers that close to the blade. If this was a big wide piece of wood, it wouldn't be a problem. You could push with one hand like that and go like this. So because this is such a narrow piece of wood, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut like this, and I'm going to set my fence to cut off the piece I don't want. And I'm just eyeballing this based on the line I've previously drawn in that tooth there. Latch it in place. I can check the other side, make sure that that still lines up on the other side. So now my fingers are going to be at least 3 or 4 inches away from this. I'm still using the pushing stick to push the wood through so my fingers aren't near the blade. And I'm standing off to the left side here so that if this piece of wood gets caught between the fence and the blade and gets thrown backwards, it won't poke me in the belly. Now I am constantly pushing this wood in slightly so that it stays flush against the rip fence while I feed it through. But don't push so hard that if you slip, your fingers are going into that blade. So those are the 2 basic types of cuts you can do with a table saw: ripping with the rip fence or a cross cut with the miter gauge. Now there's nothing that says you can't do a cross cut with the rip fence either. Should be wearing eye protection while doing these cuts. I do not recommend wearing gloves. That's just something that gets caught in the blade and pulled in. So when you're done with the saw, you should lower the blade, or another option is put the rip fence very close to the blade and lock it in place so that this blade won't cut anybody.